Well, hello and welcome to a special Movie Burner podcast from Movie Burner Entertainment. We're only 7 days away from the release of Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi, and we're talking Star Wars for the next 8 days, from The Phantom Menace to The Force Awakens. We'll be discussing these in episodic order, and we will even throw in the first of the standalone films, Rogue One, for good measure. The countdown begins.
And now we're moving on to the second film of the prequel trilogy, of course, Attack of the Clones. In my opinion, the worst saga film ever created. And I say saga because, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, the holiday special is a thing, it exists, but that is a complete and utter abomination, and I don't consider it as even being a film. So yeah, Attack of the Clones is the worst saga film ever created. What's your thoughts on it, Stephen?
Well, I think from a kick-off, I think this is going to be an interesting conversation with you, John. Yeah, I mean, the Attack of the Clones, it takes 10 years after initially meeting Anakin Skywalker. Shares a forbidden romance with Padme, while Obi-Wan investigates an assassination attempt on the Senator and discovers a secret clone army crafted for the Jedi. Sounds good.
Yeah, as a synopsis goes, that sounds wonderful, apart from that forbidden romance nonsense. Dear God. But in terms of intros, listen, I says it was the worst episodic saga film, but the intro is the best in my opinion. It's one of my favourites. The sight of Amidalla's Royal Naboo starship spinning round after appearing on the screen and descending down into Coruscant, it's visually eye candy, it's gorgeous. And obviously after that there's an attempt to assassinate her, which starts with a bang, really. In terms of visuals, it begins well, just that nonsense afterwards, it just brings it down.
Yeah, as far as the episodes go, it was a very unique introduction to this episode. We were used to the after the opening crawl, you know, the camera panning down onto whatever planet where the action was happening. It certainly was one of the memorable moments in the Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, and that ship itself is just absolutely lovely. I never touched upon that in the previous podcast, but that ship, the design of that, is one of the better ones in the prequel trilogy. I thought the explosion itself was a little bit predictable. They obviously set it up with the wide shot of the docking bay, and we knew Amidala wasn't dying, but it was obvious that she'd swapped with her bodyguard Padme. And obviously this spelled the end of Keira Knightley's involvement in the Star Wars saga. Sadly, Jar Jar survived.
Yeah, clearly the timeline forces a recast of the character Anakin, and Jake Lloyd was replaced by Hayden Christensen. John?
Thank the Lord. But then I say that they replace him with Hayden Christensen, so but I'm not going to be too harsh on Hayden. You know, it wasn't his fault. He's actually not that bad of an actor. He's proven himself in some roles following on from this. It was really just the writing of George Lucas, as we touched upon in the previous podcast. Yeah, he's not a writer.
Yeah, just like episode 1, you know, the problem isn't the story. In fact, the plot to episode 2 isn't that bad. It's again the dialogue, the delivery and execution is what fails this film.
Yeah, as Han Solo, as Harrison Ford said in the original trilogy, you can write this shit, Jordan, but you can't see it. And it's true. Poor Hayden Christensen knows about that as well. He actually had to take a break from acting after he starred as Anakin Skywalker, and Lord knows we know why. In terms of the story though, after that we obviously see Palpatine demanding extra protection, and he assigns 2 Jedi who have returned recently to Coruscant to protect her. And who else is it going to be other than Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin? And we're introduced quickly to the 2. As you says, it's a new Anakin Skywalker, it's Hayden Christensen, and the 2 are bantering with each other in the lift scene. And to be fair, their chemistry is quite good. It works. You have a believable relationship with each other. You feel that they've been through quite a period together, and yeah. They
kind of touch on that in the elevator scene, you know, where I think Anakin saved Obi-Wan from a nest of gun darts or whatever they were called. Can't remember if that was correct or not.
Oh, your memory's better than mine.
It did show that they had a history at this point. As I said, this is 10 years after the events of the Phantom Menace. Anakin is now Obi-Wan's Padawan. He's seen as a father figure to Anakin, and as you said, there's a bit of banter in the lift. This is, I think, the first time that Anakin is seeing Padme in such a long time as well.
And we have the first ominous presence of the awkward Anakin Skywalker, where he's talking about being anxious and worried and nervous about meeting her, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's quite phenomenal, that scene, when you think about that. The one awkward character in that scene, and this is a scene involving Jar Jar Binks as well, and he isn't the awkward one in the scene.
The fact he's even alive is bad enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at this point, George Lucas had listened to the fans, as far as that character's gone. Very brief, scaled down, I should say, appearances from Jar Jar Binks in this one compared to the Phantom Menace. He certainly did take on board that the fan reaction to that character wasn't overwhelming.
And obviously, as the story progresses through, as we touched upon, they meet Padme. They take on the role of a bodyguard, and then there's an idiotic decision made by one of the characters. I think it's I can't remember the name. A shape-shifting bounty hunter attempts to assassinate Sam Wessel attempts to assassinate Queen Amidala while she's sleeping in her bedroom and being protected by two of the best Jedis of the time. It was idiotic. I don't know why he decided to do that, but it sets up a nice chase scene. I have to say, it's one of my favourite scenes in Attack of the Clones. Chase scene's quite well worked, although the behind the scenes shot of the chap falling, I don't think it was Hugh McGregor or Hayden Christensen. They were testing the drop. That was absolutely terrible, and it was hilariously bad, the effects. But yeah, that chase scene was great. I loved that chase scene. I loved the bit where they're getting shocked and they get through the barrier. And obviously the retracing some of the original trilogy with the canteen.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this yesterday, in regards to the scenes throughout Coruscant. It was clearly homage to Blade Runner, although it did remind me a little of the Fifth Element as well. I mean, that sequence is quite impressive. I liked that. I liked the fact that we were going to the sort of ground level of the city. It was very interesting to see how the lives were led. A lot of gambling dens and watering holes, etc.
Death sticks being dished out.
Yeah, I mean, it was a nice scene, and it set up the film very well, with the opening sequences, as we touched on, and the chase scene through the city. And at this point, it was actually, looking very.
Yeah, and you can just tell George Lucas was in his element, filling a location with people and making it bustling and alive after he obviously attempted that in A New Hope and failed spectacularly because of the lack of budget and the extras, I would imagine. So he was probably in his element. And as I say, we kind of retrace history. I say retrace, this technically takes place before, but you know what I mean. It's obviously going back to a familiar haunt about the canteen, and that was nice, a modern take on that. Obi-Wan retracing.
Yeah, I mean, as they track down the bounty hunter Zam Wessel, is it Wessel? Through Coruscant, and they try to get some answers. Who sent her to assassinate the senator? This is our first glimpse of Jango Fett, who kind of just flies off into the night.
Yeah, and it also sets up the most interesting arc in this film, with Obi-Wan trying to hunt down who was responsible for killing Sam Wessel, or I can't say his name.
Pretty sure that is the name.
Yeah, he goes off and tries to discover this, and this is probably the most interesting part of this film, really. Obi-Wan's hunt for him and where it takes him.
I mean, Obi-Wan at this point in the trilogy is playing detective. Certainly within this episode, throughout, that's what he's doing. He's investigating where the dart came from that killed the bounty hunter. Tracking that down to one of his friends in a sort of 50s style diner.
Yeah. What was
Dax, I think.
Dax, yeah. Yeah, he was an odd looking guy, him.
Yeah, and then pinpointing this in the Jedi archives of where this technology came from. So as I said, Obi-Wan at this point was playing detective. Anakin was set up to protect Padme, and obviously this is where their relationship, I was going to say blossoms, but it didn't convince me.
Yeah, as I touched upon with the chemistry between Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen being quite good and realistic, there was not even a hint of chemistry between Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen. It just didn't work. I don't know why. Whoever was responsible for the casting of Christensen alongside Portman, no, it didn't work. Probably Lucas, and we've mentioned this before in previous podcasts when we discussed Gary Oldman potentially playing General Grievous, and I've said before, he shouldn't be casting, he shouldn't be directing. Storyboarding, coming up with worlds, yes. Anything else, no, George. Stay away.
The other thing that really disappoints in this film is the overuse of CGI. This was used clearly in The Phantom Menace, but not to the extent of the Attack of the Clones, which I think was one of the first films that was completely shot digitally.
Yeah, and certainly in the behind the scenes footage it certainly appears that way. There's a lot of green screen, and it couldn't have been good for the actors. It really couldn't. I mean, I've always heard people who have worked with Christopher Nolan, for instance, who likes a really practical, hands-on setup where he's actually in the location. Speak about how it aids them in their acting performance, so it couldn't have been good for the actors walking in front of green screens and not having anything to really work off of. But in terms of visuals, I have to say, early on with Obi-Wan's journey through the Jedi Temple, I think that was actually a library in perhaps Ireland or something. It may have been Dublin, I can't recall, but that scene was great. The scene where he speaks to Yoda when he's in the middle of teaching younglings or training younglings. I hate that name, by the way. That was horrific. Whoever came up with that needs shot. But that visual of the map of the galaxy exploding out of the little ball in the middle of the room, that was great. That was brilliant. So those visuals were okay, but it was just the overemphasis and the overuse of CG. It wasn't a good decision. I
think at this stage we got our first glimpse of the first computer generated Yoda as well, John. We were certainly discussing this off air yesterday before we did the podcast for the Phantom Menace, where we looked back on the trailer for the Phantom Menace and the puppet they used for that film, how horrendous looking it was. It didn't resemble Yoda in any way, shape or form. This time it did resemble him, although he was completely computer generated.
Yeah, the puppet was cross-eyed and it looked like a strange little gremlin sort of thing. Good lord, it looked terrifying, I have to say. The CG one, it was better, but it's aged horrifically since, much like everything in this film. I really do hope they go back and rework these films. We've spoke about this before. Most of it being filmed on green screen really opens up that possibility where they can go back and redo most of the effects, and it's something they really need to be looking at doing. At this point, the two main characters, Obi-Wan and Anakin, really separate and go their separate ways. As you said, Anakin assumes the role of bodyguard, and he assumed that role early in the film, but he continues his role of bodyguard. I think he goes off to Naboo with Amidala, looks after her because there's fears of maybe more attempts on her life, whilst Obi-Wan continues his role of tracking down the Dart, and I think this leads him to a new planet, Kamino. This was one of my favourite locations, I have to say. This is one thing I can't criticise Mr. Lucas for. As I said, he's a great world builder, and the new planets, for the most part, the prequels were interesting and enjoyable, and Kamino was one of my favourites.
Yeah, this part of the film, it kind of flits between Obi-Wan's story and Anakin's story. Anakin's story at this point, if you're going to go down the road of having a romantic involvement, which we know, we already know, spoiler alert, is that Anakin is the father of Luke and Leia, and Padme is the mother. It's very crucial that you get that relationship correct, you get the chemistry correct, and the emotion is there as well, and this is where this film fails. I'm not doubting the acting abilities of either Hayden Christensen or Natalie Portman, who is one of the best actresses out at the moment. It's all about direction and delivery as far as I'm concerned, and the dialogue really let both actors down. I think Hayden Christensen suffered for this more than Natalie Portman did, but as you said, Obi-Wan on Kamino, the CG, especially in the indoor scenes with the aliens, I think he sits down in some kind of weird metallic melting spoon.
Yeah, it's like a spoon-shaped chair, yeah.
And the plot is explained to us a little further on why there's this base on this water planet. The aliens explain to them that this order of an army was ordered by Master Sifo-Dyas. This is one of the parts in this trilogy that really did puzzle me. I didn't really think too much about it at the time because I thought we've still got another episode to go. This will be explained when we do get into episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, tomorrow. Probably touch on that a wee bit more, but certainly at this point that character doesn't seem to go anywhere, and as I said, I was hoping in the next episode that part of it would be explained. But no, I mean, the whole clone army, it was slightly touched upon on A New Hope, with the scenes in Obi-Wan's house. His homestead, I should say, where Luke Skywalker touches upon the Clone Wars. So that was a nice touch. As far as the scenes with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Jango Fett, they were actually quite well acted out. Very tense scenes, as Obi-Wan is pushing for answers. Yeah,
that was one of my favourite parts of the film. It really was. Yeah, you're right with the Master Sifo-Dyas thing. They didn't go anywhere with that character. They mentioned the name almost like fan service, but there was no fan service. Nobody knew who this guy was, and they never really developed it afterwards. It was strange, really strange.
I think there was a conversation slightly after this part of the film where Anakin,
I think it was Mace Windu, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were having a discussion via intercom where Obi-Wan believed that Master Sifo-Dyas had died 10 years previous to this. I might be wrong in that, but as far as that went, it didn't really go anywhere after that.
Yeah, but that fight between Jango Fett and Obi-Wan on Kamino was really enjoyable. It was a good fight, obviously in the rain, and also a young Boba Fett there as well. That was one of my most enjoyable parts of the film. I thought the CG for the most part was okay. And obviously the introduction of the Slave One. In terms of the CG, I don't know if it's held up quite as well today. I've not seen this film in a number of years. I actually actively avoid watching it because it kind of
I think most of the sequence is quite impressive, and it still is. There's a little few moments in it where you can clearly see it's CG, especially I think where both of them are dangling off the edge of the sort of edge. You can clearly see that it's the actual characters are CG as well. But no, it's a great scene, and that's, as you said, it's the first time we see the Slave One, and as we know, they get away, and Obi-Wan has got to pursue them through an asteroid field. Yeah,
that was a great moment in the film as well. Obviously with the sonic, I don't even know what they are, bombs or whatever. I don't really know what it was he was letting off, but the sound that came off it, I mind seeing it for the first time, and it was great. The sound coming off it, the way it was worked, the visuals, it destroyed the asteroids. Brilliant little sequence, and that really takes us down onto Geonosis, and we meet another great character, one of my favourite characters in the prequels actually, Count Dooku, played by the great Christopher Lee.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I remember when I heard about his casting, I was very pleased. He's from the same school as the great Peter Cushing and Vincent Price, who incidentally the three of them I think all shared the same birthday. But if you're getting classic actors coming in, I think Christopher Lee at this point was also appearing in the Lord of the Rings trilogy at this point in his career as well.
Yeah, they've been Saruman,
yeah, and what a great addition to the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, he was just a great character. Also, we don't see a great deal of him at this point in the film, but certainly towards the end he comes into prominence. But even when he's dealing with Obi-Wan and he's got him locked up in these energy binds, and he's sort of taunting him and openly telling him there's a Sith running the Senate, and he knows he'll not believe him, but he's telling him to his face exactly what's happening, and he's kind of playing with him. But that was a great little scene.
It's also another reveal that Count Dooku was the master of Qui-Gon Jinn at this point, and it was nice to have a little sort of flashback to that character. It's very easy to just dispose of characters after they've served their purpose, but it was nice that they linked to the character of Qui-Gon. He was the Padawan learner to Count Dooku.
Obviously Anakin kicks into action finally at this part of the film when he starts having visions in his sleep about his mother getting captured with the Sand People, and he decides he has to return to Tatooine and deal with it. This is again one of my favourite parts in the film.
It's also our first introduction to a very young Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru as well, and we get to see the Skywalker homestead from Tatooine as well, which was it was very impressive.
Did they get blue milk in there?
They probably did, yeah. They certainly got that. The scenes were interesting to look at the homestead from a different point of view. You saw different angles, and obviously some familiar rooms that we saw before with Luke, C-3PO having his oil bath, and that was the same room that Anakin and Padme were in when Anakin obviously had his breakdown. So yeah, I mean it was nice to see those sets recreated for this adventure, you know.
And then obviously while he's having his little stay in Tatooine, he wreaks absolute hell down upon the Sand People, in a scene which is just we talk about the visuals aging horrendously, but I tell you, with the sunset visuals and it being really red, and perfectly captures the fury that's inside Anakin once he discovers that his mother's died. Also, he says before in the previous podcast, Shmi Skywalker, she'll not be mourned by anybody out with Anakin, let's be honest. And the actress herself couldn't even die with sort of a realism. But that scene where he destroys the Sand People, I get so much enjoyment out of that. Him igniting the lightsaber and just unleashing absolute hell upon them. It was great.
And I believe it wasn't just the men.
It wasn't just the men, it was the women and the children too. They're animals and he slaughtered them like animals. That was a great line as well. For all the bad dialogue he had throughout the trilogy, that was a great line. And it was the first time we got to see Anakin really showcase signs of anger and the Vader that within.
Yeah, I think up at that point he was really just petulant, wasn't he? You know, it was especially in the scenes with Obi-Wan in the early parts of the film where Obi-Wan was just lecturing him half the time, you know, don't do this, don't do that. And it was good to see, you saw this dark side in him very early on. And
then after that, he decides to go and rescue his friend. At that point, his friend, when he sees Obi-Wan obviously in distress during a hologram conversation with the council, and he decides to go and rescue him from Geonosis, an ill-fated rescue because it doesn't work. And that leads us on to that horrific factory scene where R2-D2's sprouted thrusters, and again, a continuity issue. Where were these thrusters in the original trilogy?
Yeah, he could have used them when he was knocked off a Jabba's sail barge.
Exactly,
no, this is when we didn't touch upon this previously, but this is when we see the full sort of built version of C-3PO as well, for a very brief moment before he loses his head in this factory. The whole sequence is, again, it's George Lucas has got a very strange sense of humour, a very unique sense of humour. I can imagine him watching that sequence in his private theatre, giggling away. It was to add some comedy, but it didn't. Slapstick. It's not a bad level of comedy. Some of the greatest comedy actors, the Laurel and Hardys, even in the UK here, Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson, slapstick can be done greatly. In this case, it wasn't. The seriousness of Obi-Wan being held hostage with Count Dooku and those what are they called again? Those aliens.
Oh, I think they're Geonosians, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact name.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't have been the time or place for slapstick comedy. As far as the visuals in those sequences as well, they're very dated. This takes us up to the point where the three main characters are being chained to these sort of concrete pillars in some kind of arena. Again, the CG in this, especially when they're interacting with these large animals, aliens, or whatever you want to call them, it's terrible. It was terrible then in 2002. I remember, I went to see this in the cinema in Glasgow with my wife, and I said this to John at the time. I think I came back and you'd asked me what it was like, and I said at this point in the film I wanted to walk out. It was just horrendous. It was really just so bad. The dialogue was terrible. The CG was terrible. It's even worse now because it's so dated, but even then it was terrible looking.
Yeah, things went from bad to worse from that factory scene onto that. And we've seen little hints of this where the characters are interacting with CG animals earlier in the film, when of course Anakin's rolling around in a field and he falls off of it's like a buffalo alien type thing. Just horrific, absolutely horrific. And we'd never touched upon that and done that justice, that scene. The whole rom-com horrendous picnic in the field while Obi-Wan's off doing things, but we're not.
No, we're not going to get into it too much because we are trying to forget it. But no, the whole sequences, between Padme and Anakin on Naboo really killed the pacing of the film. You had all the quick pace of Obi-Wan Kenobi investigating and trying to escape from these droidicars, and then you're cutting back to Anakin and Padme rolling about a field with these big ball-shaped aliens I think he was riding on one of them at one point, and he thought it was hilarious to fall off. Terrible, absolutely terrible.
Yeah, but just cutting back to the arena, you're absolutely right. The CG was terrible, and I just felt that whole scene was just padding out the story until the Jedi could come and rescue them. And even that was horrific as well when the Jedi turned up. It just
I've got two problems with that one, John. The Battle of Geonosis, as it was called, it was over before it started. I think this is why the animated series, The Clone Wars, had to be invented, because everybody was looking forward to seeing the introduction and how the Clone Wars started. And in a way, this is how it did start. But the CGI was so bad. I think the whole audience wanted the whole sequence to be over as quickly as possible. There were some shots that I thought were quite clever. They were sort of panning into control rooms and it was going out of focus as if it was, for its day, a realistic way of convincing the audience that it was on set, if you like, it was really happening. But overall, it looks like a PlayStation 1 game to me. The effects are so dated now. The fact that they did not use one actor to play any of the troops, every one of them was CG. It was just a bad decision.
Yeah, this film actually been titled The Attack of the Clones is one of the worst cases of false advertisement I think I've ever seen in a film. The attack sequences from the clones only last about 5 minutes, and it's in the final act of the film.
It's still, sorry John, it's still the worst title of any Star Wars film, Attack of the Clones. It's worse than the Phantom Menace. I actually don't mind the title of the Phantom Menace, but the title itself. One thing I will say about the sequences is the sound. You can't fault the sound. Ben Burtt, I think the chap's name is, who did all the sound. He was a sound engineer on the original trilogy, and I think a lot of the sound on the prequel trilogy was him as well. The actual sounds within this film, as you touched upon with those implosion effects, was very impressive. Certainly was in the cinema. And again, for the Battle of Geonosis, the sounds, I think there was one point one of the ships went up and then it was pulled back down, and you could hear, especially in the theatre, you could hear the rumbling of the ship crashing to the ground again. So from that point of view, yes, I'll give that plus point. Yeah,
throughout the prequel trilogy, that's one thing you certainly can't criticise is the sound effects. The effects in all the Star Wars films have always been fantastic. But yeah, just touching upon the lack of real people within the clone troopers' armour, it couldn't have been hard to even create a basic set and have, or even go on location to somewhere like Saudi Arabia or back to Tunisia and employ maybe a couple of hundred people to put on the clone trooper armour. I mean, I heard from people who now cosplay as these clone troopers that the armour's quite uncomfortable, but that's no excuse. They should have come up with something that was practical to wear and made that happen, because just looking at it now, it looks horrific, it looks horrendous. The Clone Wars TV show actually looks more realistic than the film now.
Ironically, yeah. This takes us up to obviously the final sort of lightsaber duels. We touched upon what I was going to talk about in the previous episode in regards to the Phantom Menace's lightsaber duel between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan and Darth Maul being the best physical battle. In Attack of the Clones, I felt that George Lucas was trying to top that with, first of all, Count Dooku taking on Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, and then finally that scene that I want to forget about, the sequence between Count Dooku and a computer-generated Yoda.
Oh dear. The over-the-top acrobatics. The actual fight between Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin, I didn't mind it too much. I liked the back and forth sort of a chat between them when he's almost taunting Anakin, and he really does school him, literally, with the dismemberment. I don't know what it is with Star Wars films, they seem to like limb dismemberment. Must be a weird fetish of George's. But that actual fight was okay, I didn't mind that too much. I liked the way he held his lightsaber at a slight tilt, that was cool. And I think he had a certain style, I think he touched upon it as well, maybe the fighting style. That was a nice little addition to canon, with each have got different styles. But that Yoda sequence was just horrendous. Why they didn't just make him like an emperor in Return of the Jedi? He's just incredibly adept at using the Force and just using the Force. But no, you decided to have him pirouetting and spinning in the air and using the lightsaber, and it was just wasn't good, and it's aged horrendously.
Yeah, I mean, just like the Phantom Menace, the end sort of musical number keeps you hanging on to not so much a cliffhanger, but certainly hinting on where the story is going to take us next into the next episode. One thing I will say is the sequence between Anakin and Padme when they're getting married, is the John Williams score, Across the Stars. It's one of the memorable moments of that film, and certainly one of the most memorable scores that John Williams has done for a Star Wars film.
Yeah, and just prior to that, I'm going to quickly touch upon it, but I will get into what you were touching on there with that final scene, the wedding scene. I actually loved the scene of Count Dooku fleeing and returning to Coruscant to meet the Emperor. That, just the music in that as well, it was really memorable, the music, and also the scene of his ship. I think he had like it's almost like a big material thing that came out. I can't recall exactly what it was, but it was eye-catching. It was like, he obviously had a very small craft. Yeah, it was like a parachute, you're right, yeah, it was like a parachute type thing, and that was visually arresting.
Yeah, I mean the dialogue between Count Dooku and Darth Sidious was very similar to the sequence with Darth Maul and Darth Sidious in the Phantom Menace. Very dark, and again it's sort of setting up what's to come from the dialogue between the two Sith Lords, and as I said, that takes us into the final scene.
Yeah, and that final scene, as you were saying, it was the score was absolutely phenomenal. Also, I wasn't overly pleased with the whole relationship between Padme or Amidala and Anakin, but they had to get together. Also, the story implored that they get together and have Luke and Leia, so it had to be done. And what I liked was that they kept up the running theme throughout the Star Wars trilogies, that C-3PO and R2-D2 star in the final scene. I think they've been in every single final shot, and as you said, there's no dialogue as well, so that was nice that they kept that going, and it was beautifully shot as well. Every shots of Naboo in that film are actually quite well done. I think they went on set to Italy. I think it was one of the lakes, and that was a lovely setting.
And that's our summary of Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, which was released in 2002. Tomorrow we'll be talking about Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which was released in 2005. And we'd just like to thank you. If you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can do this just clicking the button just up on the corner there saying subscribe for more podcasts from the Movie Burners. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Movie Burners, and keep up to date with our Movie Burner blog, where our writers Darren Gautier, Max Valentine, Josh Fingerhut and George Nash are on the Movie Burner blog. That is on our website at movieburnerentertainment.org.